Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast, here from the Snowden Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette, and our special guest today. It's not often we have two liberal MNAs in the same room, much less the same family, but that's what we have today.
Or a love story. We've never had a love story.
Marwah Rizqy, Greg Kelley, joining us as our guest today. Thank you both for being here.
Yeah.
Our pleasure.
So let's begin with what was the big story about a week or so ago. Marwah, you decided that you were not going to run come 2026 in the next provincial election. You have two little guys now. One of them, by the way, is here. So hi to Abraham. I'm sure he's
Honest
listening.
Abe.
Yeah, he's here. So obviously not an easy decision to make. And I know, Greg, we talked to you at the time. How long did it take you to reach that decision? How hard was it to make, to say, I'm not going to run, I have a family?
Well, maybe like at the very beginning of this mandate, I was like already juggling with my decision, because the first time when I had Gabriel, after only 3 weeks after giving birth, I was back at the National Assembly, and we did the back and forth every week, Greg, Gabriel, and me, every single week back to Quebec, and that was really tough. And then when Abe came, I remember Greg was at the Quebec, at the National Assembly, and I messaged him like, you need to come back right now because we're having a baby. And he was like 5 weeks early. So I remember I'm like, oh my God, I'm all alone by myself here. My husband is away and I'm not even ready to give birth, because like I was not expecting Abe at this time. And when they gave me Abe, I'm like, this is it. This is my last mandate. So on June 6th, I made my decision. And then it was when will be the best time for me to announce, even though there's no good time to announce you're leaving, you're stepping down.
Well, you broke a lot of hearts. But Greg, you offered to step down.
Yeah, I did.
So that Marwah could continue.
For sure. And, we had a lot of discussions. Marwah's been thinking about this since, even since Gabe arrived. It was just on her mind. And I did say that if you want to continue in politics, if you want to stay, I'll stay home. I'll find something to do in Montreal. I wanted to support her. Marwah could be the premier of Quebec. I believe that. She could be the leader of our party. I know that. But, those are the discussions we had. And for everyone that's listening to us, I work for Philip Couillard. I saw what it took, the job, to do it. There's never a moment you're not working. And it's the same for François Legault, it's the same for Pauline Marois, same for Jean-Charles. You go down the list. It's an extremely demanding job. So we had a lot of those frank discussions that if we wanted to think about that, if you wanted to go to that step, what does it require? And it's a tremendous amount of your own personal time. There's not a lot of time for your family. There's not a lot of time for your friends. So, yeah, we had those discussions. But I was ready to do whatever it took, and I'm still ready to do whatever it takes to support her in her career.
Right. I'm curious, Marwah, to that point, when your husband says to you, look, I believe in your future as a leader potentially of this province. I am prepared to do whatever it takes for you to do that. Did you have second thoughts after he said that and think, you know what, I hadn't really considered that. If you're willing to do that, Greg, maybe I will continue to run?
No, in my heart and in my mind, I just want to be with my sons every single day, because right now I leave on Monday. I take the train, I go to Quebec, and I only come back either on Thursday night or on Friday night. So I just missed my boys 4 to 5 times a week. I'm not there with them if they need me, and they do need me. And people are telling me, oh, but what is the message you're sending to the woman? Well, I have a voice and I have a choice, and I made my decision. And for me, this is it. I give everything to politics, and I love what I'm doing. But I just love more my kids.
To what you just said now, there were people out there criticizing you for making this decision?
No, not criticizing, but saying, but what is the message you're saying to other women that cannot have it all? But with all the respect, I just feel that I do have it all. For me, when I was a young girl, unfortunately, I wasn't raised like in the kind of loving family that Greg had. I was raised in a family with, unfortunately, with a lot of violence, and my mother never had a chance to go to school, so she gave me everything that she could. But on the other hand, my father was very violent, so for me, I just knew that one day I would like to create my own family. a family with no dispute, with no one's gonna raise their hands on the kids, or no one's gonna raise their voice in my house. And now that I have that, I cherish it so much. So this is for me my number one priority.
It's interesting because when you were on the last time prior to the arrival of little Abe, you were talking basically of playing out your term and no talk about you said leadership wasn't on your mind then, that perhaps you would pursue that not this election but maybe the next election. And then all of a sudden, I guess this is why we were a bit gobsmacked too, because you sounded so determined, and totally understand your decision for sure. But the fact of the matter is, so many people, as Greg pointed out, thought of you in a leadership position and leadership role, and then basically you're gone from the scene now. Like you might come back. You suggested that perhaps in some time,
at least 15 years.
15 years, but.
Yeah.
I'm wondering one thing though. There was a recent poll that came out with Pablo Rodriguez at the helm. They're saying that Liberals would have a chance to win. Were you aware of any of that before you made your decision?
Absolutely, but just before, can I circle back about what you just said?
Yeah.
Between the last interview and today, I had another pregnancy, and we were expecting twins.
Oh,
and when you go at your medical appointment and you hear 2 heartbeats, and in your mind you're gonna have 2 new babies,
right.
and then you lose one at the 12 weeks mark. You're just okay, maybe I need to slow down. And then your doctor is like, no, you need to rest, you need to slow down, you cannot do the back and forth with Quebec. That was a moment for me, also a turning point. I may have pushed my own limits, and now I just want to make sure that what is good for me is also best for my kids. Now, of course, I thought about the next election. I can feel it. People are very tired and mostly upset with Premier Legault. But even if tomorrow someone's going to promise me to be a minister, no. My decision is made and it's final without any appeal. I want to be in the same city with my kids. And I just know that the job to deliver what people need to have, you need to be dedicated. There's no time to be on holidays. You're always on call. And I remember because we were talking with your father. He was on vacation and something happened and he had to come back in Quebec. That's the duty. And this is something I do respect so much that I know I cannot do both. I cannot leave my kids and say, you know what, I'm going to give 100% to my job and 100% to my kids. I'm going to fail. And I know I'm probably going to fail my own kids, and I don't want to fail them.
It underscores a dilemma for women in politics for so long. I mean, it's one thing, yes, you're out there and you're a power force and all the rest, but people don't realize the sacrifice that entails on a family level. And, no matter how much we've progressed in putting more women in power, men don't have to deal with the same kind of dilemma. Never have and never will. I mean, and that's a sad reality. But as you point out, your heart is with being with the family, and I wasn't aware of the second child situation, which certainly would mitigate against doing this more.
So to that point, though, I mean, so this is a discussion you two have together.
Oh, yeah.
You've made your mind up. You're sitting, and the difference, I guess, here is this is not one person saying to another, "My job is demanding." You have no idea. You're both in the same boat.
Yeah.
You're both MNAs. So, what was that discussion like at the beginning when it first came up?
There's no doubt the fact that we both have a job that is mostly in Quebec City presents a whole other set of challenges to any other person in any other type of profession. It's, we have great jobs, but the traveling is definitely something that it drags on you and it wears on you. And that was, it became pretty clear when we were packing up the car. And this was just with Gabe, and we brought Gabe to the National Assembly quite a bit with us at the beginning. I mean, there was nowhere else for him to go. And it was extremely draining having him with us at work, and the National Assembly routine is not set for little kids. You start very early in the morning, you're at the National Assembly 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then you go home around 7, 8 o'clock at night. That's not easy for little guys. So when we were having those discussions, there was no doubt that was a huge part of it, is every time you leave for Quebec City, and even when I go to Quebec City, you leave a big part of your heart at home with the kids, and that drags. And just to come back, Bill, what we were saying, there has been, though, a change even for men. And if we look through some of the MNAs who have decided either not to run again or sometimes have left, a lot of the time the family reason is true. Their dads are just sort of saying, I'm missing quite a bit at home, and I don't think I necessarily want to do that anymore. And I'm the son of an MNA. I saw it. I saw my dad was in Quebec City pretty much my entire life. He got elected right before the last referendum. I was 9 years old. And there was no iPhones, there was no FaceTime, there was none of that, right? But my dad was always very good at picking up the phone. When we had questions about our homework, we wanted to talk to Dad. He would leave a meeting. When we finally were able to email him, that became a lot easier because he could message us throughout the day. But it for sure presents a lot of challenges. My mom was an angel, 5 kids at home. She was still a teacher, and she kind of like kept the house in as much order as possible.
And look how you grew up. See?
Not so bad in the end. It kind of worked out well. But yeah, Aaron, so these are all things that we definitely discussed amongst ourselves. And going forward, too, I would like to stay in politics. I like Marwah, I love what I do. And from there, we feel like we're in a base that at least one of us has made a decision to stay back in Montreal. And we know our kids will have a parent who's there at the end of the day, tuck them in, be there for them, and that's really crucial for us, and there wasn't many other solutions.
But Marwah, you're not off the hook yet.
No.
You're still the education critic,
and
and we got a doozy this week with Monsieur Roberge and Monsieur Legault announcing that they're going to have to cut back on international students. We're apparently at 120,000. They would like that maybe cut in half. They're not saying who, but there's a lot of suspicion as usual. Last time we were on, we talked about tuition increases for the Anglo universities. I'm guessing you have feelings about this subject as well.
Well, my colleague Michelle Setlakush is now the critic for the higher education, and she said it, well, we would love to see the data, and what is actually your plan, Mr. Roberge? Can you tell us exactly where do you want to cut? And remember Alexandre Cloutier?
Yes.
He's a péquiste. And now he is the head of the Réseau UQ. And he said, wait a second, what you're announcing may have massive impact for the university across Quebec.
And the economy.
L'Université du Québec à Chicoutimi, Rimouski, Abitibi, and also the CEGEP. Some CEGEP program can only run because we do have students from abroad coming here. Boucard Diouf, like people are very proud of Boucard Diouf, but remember, he came here as a student at l'Université du Québec à Rimouski.
Right.
So we have to keep that in mind. Yes, there is the impact of the university, but also the economy. But today we're all very happy to have a Boucard Diouf members of our nation of Quebec.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowden Deli, serving Montrealers since 1946 and home of the city's best smoked meat sandwich, the Snowden Deli, DeCarry Boulevard, north of Queen Mary Road.
But you have a suspicious mind, I know. When you hear about cutbacks, and they haven't designated which universities necessarily, but there's a feeling.
If I have to put my 20 on something,
Yes.
I won't be surprised if he says like it's going to be Concordia and McGill. I won't be
Well,
surprised.
he came out yesterday as part of the statement, Jean-François Roberge, when he was asked if it targets, I thought this was kind of laughable actually, if it targets McGill and Concordia, to which he said, no, this is not
We haven't
targeting
decided
them at all.
yet.
Where are most of these
They
foreign
decided.
students ending up? They're ending up at McGill and Concordia. And then he pointed to something, I found this rather interesting. He said, if you look at the numbers for enrollment in McGill this year, they're actually up. What he failed to point out is they're up because there are $3,000 scholarships being offered, and that's the only reason. Otherwise, McGill and Concordia have lost tuition, lost enrollment, all because of what the CAC did.
Concordia is
with their
down
plan on tuition.
16%
But
actually.
So,
today is a
doesn't make
special day
sense.
for McGill. Today is a special day for McGill. 20 years back-to-back, #1 medical program in Canada.
Yeah.
And the CAC has a tendency to go after our higher education institutions.
Yeah.
And, everything right now with the CAC, every problem they face, they pivot to immigration.
Yep.
There is nothing wrong with having a discussion about immigration policy. Is it responding to the needs of society? Are there too many, new arrivals that came here that put pressure on services. You can have that discussion. It's legitimate. It's a public policy discussion that has to be had. Can we have better coordination with our federal, provincial, municipal levels of government on immigration? The response to that question is yes. We have to look at those things. But the CAC doesn't want to have a real discussion on immigration policy. They want to find someone to blame. Because right now it is not going well.
Well, they're 20 points behind in the polls. And
Absolutely.
Mr. Legault's thinking is that essentially, well, as long as you target the Anglos, maybe, this will be the key to restoring power. And I find that so bizarre.
Well, to Bill's point, it's worth pointing out this is the same minister, by the way, who's famously quoted as saying he hears too much English spoken on the streets of downtown Montreal, referencing students in that, right?
For sure, and nobody ever talks about the fact that tourism in Quebec is way up.
Right.
I mean, maybe some of those tourists are coming here to
Yeah,
Montreal
well,
speaking
we
English.
pointed
but hey,
that out, yes.
we won't look into those statistics. But there are so many things on the government's plate right now. The premier went to Paris, to France, for the francophonie, and for all the beautiful things about the common language of Quebec and the culture, he decides to make it all about immigration and saying how Quebec doesn't want all these new arrivals, these asylum seekers. Embarrassing us in a lot of ways. We keep our internal affairs at home. We talk about that here. We don't go on the international scene and start talking about that. But what's going on in Quebec City? What's going on in Quebec in general? Northfolk, project that is coming off the rails. Probably, we know it's hundreds of millions of dollars that are invested in this from the taxpayers' point of view. It's going poorly. Anytime something comes out in the healthcare sector, it's not going well. There's problems in the Côte-Nord. There's serious issues in Mauricie with the protection of youth. They pivot towards immigration. They pivot towards the identity card to try to get away from having to talk about the real issues that matter to a lot of electors.
But why do they think that's the ticket to power?
They're convinced in their mind that that's what the next ballot question is going to be about. It's going to be around identity, and they're going there. But they're in a tough spot because when you look at the political landscape right now, which is changing again, François Legault, the péquiste that he always is probably looking at Pierre Plamondon, and saying, man, I wish I could be him sometimes. Because every time he says, well, the immigration's not working, Ottawa won't give me what I want, the PQ just say, yeah, it's a good reason to leave Canada, isn't it? And he has no answer to that because his autonomous strategy is, well, I don't want to work with Ottawa, we're on our own, just give us the powers. So he's kind of put himself in a box that he's trying to go further than the PQ, but he's kind of limited. So good place for Liberals to be right now and talk about the real issues.
I would like to add one point about the hypocrisy of Mr. Legault and his government. Today, in the Journal de Montréal, they're going after the credit card spending.
Right.
And they found out that the Minister of Immigration spent 49 days in Abu Dhabi to try to recruit more people. 49 days, and then
That's rich.
They had the audacity to say, we have too many. All right, so why are you going to Abu Dhabi for 49 days to recruit more people?
We have too many of the wrong kind, is what he said.
Yeah.
The wrong kind of immigrants.
And it's just,
starting with those who speak French from places like going
But
to
in Abu Dhabi, they don't speak French.
They don't
sorry.
speak French?
They don't. They speak Arabic and English.
Yeah.
Abu Dhabi, it's the Émirats Arabes Unis. So the first language is Arabic and the second one is English.
So then the question becomes, why there?
Good question.
Nobody knows.
And why 49 days?
Do they have a beach? Is it why?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, they
I
do
don't
have
know.
a beach.
They do. Maybe that's
And
why.
look-
Listen, we pivoted from talking about you guys to talking about the government, and that's understandable. But to Bill's question a bit earlier, this idea, right, and it's been brought up before, about how fewer and fewer people actually want to go into politics. How difficult it is. I know we've spoken before about, at one point, threats, all kinds of stuff. It's become routine, sadly, in politics now. So here's a perfect case. Young family, involved in politics, both sitting members of the National Assembly. You decide to leave. You've offered to leave if that would have made the situation better. What does the future look like for people trying to get into politics in this province?
Well, it depends. Because in our situation, we are both MNAs, which is very hard. So maybe do not marry your colleague, but
That's one.
I'm very happy. But that's probably like the best thing I ever did. So, but you can do it in politics, but you need to be more organized. If you live in the same city as the place of work, it's way better. It helps a lot. And maybe Jean Lapierre was right. Politics is before when you have nothing to lose, or after when you have everything to give. But maybe in between it's much harder.
And, I really have to come back to the point that we were both in politics, because I have a lot of colleagues I can look around the table. You know, Andre Fortin has been in politics now this is his third mandate. He has two, you know, I like to say little girls, but they're, you know, growing up. One started high school, so, you know, he makes that trek. It's like 5 hours from the Pontiac to Quebec City every week, and it's not easy. I know sometimes Andre really misses being at home, and even for some of my colleagues that have older kids. Catherine Jourdain, the minister from the CAQ, said that in the news. Saying, my boys are teenagers now; they're older, but I still miss them when I'm in Quebec City. It's hard not being at home, but in the end of the day, it is doable. You still can make it work, and there are resources at the National Assembly that, you know, there is a place that we can drop off a baby or a kid if we have to. That can be very helpful, especially for MNAs who live in the Quebec City region if they ever need to use it. We do have a little bit of balance that they've coordinated our breaks from the National Assembly around sort of when schools go on break, so families can kind of have a moment to get away or at least be at home when their kids are off. So there is, you know, the National Assembly is coming around to trying to make things more attractive to young people wanting to get into politics. It's doable. It's a challenge for sure, and you're going to have to make some sacrifices. But every profession has a level of sacrifice.
But what more to that point about resources being made available when you're in this situation? What more could or should be done in your estimation? Is there something you could put your finger on and say, if we had this, it might have made things easier or better?
Better, maybe having access to our parental leave, a real one. Maybe when I was when I couldn't go back to Quebec because to protect my pregnancy, to have at least the remote vote, just like in Ottawa, that would be good. But at some point, they're just like, the truth is, your job is at the National Assembly. That's the truth. And for me, it doesn't make sense as a mother to be almost 300 kilometers from my kids if there's anything happening to them. So the real question is, how much do you want to sacrifice to be an MNA? And for me, the cost came too heavy.
I would ask, to your point, I hadn't really thought of this. Had you ever considered, say, for example, talk about being close to work, moving to Quebec City?
We thought about it, but we don't have any family in Quebec City, and our riding is here in Montreal. My riding is Saint Laurent. We live in his riding, and his parents are like 5 minutes away, which is very good.
And I get that a lot of MNAs don't necessarily live in their riding, or they live close to it, and we don't have a problem with that. It's kind of just a reality. But being in your riding, if you can be, it's a game changer. It's huge. You can basically campaign all the time because you go to the grocery store and people talk to you, right? It's a good way to be seen quite a lot by your constituents. But I think another thing, if we think about the role as an MNA too, in Ottawa, I know they do a lot of things virtually, but in some ways it makes sense, because if you're having a parliamentary hearing, not everyone can fly to Ottawa to comment on a bill, right? That's just not possible. So having a virtual mode works well for Ottawa in my view, but in Quebec, I think there's limitations. We did do some parliamentary commissions during the pandemic virtually, and there's just something that sort of misses when you're on a screen, the other person's on a screen. There's a natural flow to having a group before you talking about a piece of legislation that you just don't get virtually. But also, I know for a lot of groups in Quebec, most people can travel to Quebec City, but they enjoy coming to Quebec City. They like coming before the National Assembly and speaking to you. I mean, that's the role of a legislator. The bulk of the time, we're in commission working on legislation. That's what we do mostly. It's not sitting in the National Assembly doing question period. That's just a small part of our day. That's the part that everyone sees. So the virtual, to me, it's sort of limited. Being present is extremely important.
Back to politics. Are you a little buoyed by the poll that came out that said if Rodriguez was in charge, that the Liberals stood a chance of forming the next government? I mean, we peppered you the last time on this. You need a leadership race soon. The time.
Was that an eye opener for you? That poll that he's referring to?
I mean, eye opener, encouraging for sure. I mean, it is just a poll. It's not an election, but we know that there's Liberals out there in Quebec from all walks of life that are waiting for the Liberal Party to come back in force, the party that they voted for many, many years. We hear it. Yes, people were disgruntled. Some gave the CAQ a chance, but and it's not just myself. My colleagues hear this. We do our best. our caucus is mostly from Montreal.
But you have to be encouraged.
I'm encouraged by that, by Pablo being, that's a good poll. And the fact that the leadership race, we have many people coming forward and saying, hey, I want this job. I want to do it. That's great for the party. It will mobilize people on the ground and get us prepared for the next election.
Is there a feeling, though, amongst the Liberal Party in Quebec that it's an outsider from federal politics that's coming in that leaves a, not bitter taste, but a different taste?
Not really. Jean Charest came from the federal side. It doesn't worry me too much. I mean, look, I'll just take the case of Pablo. I've known him from liberal circles, not just federally, but provincially. He used to come to a lot of our events. He was present. So let's be honest, we have in our party a lot of liberals who are liberals on both levels, but we've also always had conservatives amongst our party who might be liberal provincially, but federally they vote conservative. And that's okay. I've always liked the Jean Charest rule. Everyone's welcome in the Liberal Party of Quebec as long as you are a federalist. That's extremely important. And then you kind of believe in Canada. But even then, the tent's open to anyone who wants to join our movement, in my view.
Do you have anybody you're supporting so far?
Not at the moment. So far, I'm just, I've spoken to everyone who is so far put their hat into the ring. And I said, come to the riding. Have a coffee or a beer with me. And at one point, I think it's important for all of the leaders, everyone who's vying to be the leader of the Liberal Party, they should come to the West Island. I'm just going to do the West Island plug here because that's where I represent. And they should either do a debate or have a forum where they present 5-10 minutes and then take questions from
Marwah,
liberal
do you have
militants.
a candidate
So, I'm
you might
happy.
support?
Me, I need to read the platform.
Yeah.
So far, there's no platform. Second of all, my understanding of the polls and Jean Talon. The Liberals who decided to vote PQ last time in Jean Talon are sending a message, Quebec Liberal Party, get yourself a good leader, get your act together, and we'll be back home. The poll shows that the 6 points that we won were coming from the PQ. So there are Liberals who are like, we don't want to vote for PQ, but we need to have an option to make sure that Legault will be gone on 2026.
Which is what we hear from a lot of Anglos, by the way.
So for me, message to everyone running for the Quebec Liberal Party. No flip-flopping on fundamental rights. No flip-flopping when it comes down to major economic issues. Get yourself together and you might win the election.
But you don't have a candidate in mind.
No, because there's no platform. And I learned from the past, sometimes people can change their mind. If you change your mind because you had like a legitimate reflection and you thought about it, good. But if you change your mind because you're not sure about the polls, I'm not your girl.
And kudos quickly just to Fred Beauchemin, to Denis Coderre. They've been out, following them on social media. They've been going to all the parts of Quebec to meet people. Pablo's doing the same thing now. And that's encouraging for us as a party, that it's not just someone saying, I want to do the job and I'm expecting it. They're out there trying to fight for it. And that's extremely important to, motivate our base and get people engaged in this leadership race.
We're going to run out of time. Excuse me, I have one last question I wanted to ask. So decisions like you made are not made in a vacuum. I wonder if anybody within the party, because we're talking about leaders of the Liberal Party, you could have been, possibly had you stayed, that person, as your husband thinks, you could have been Premier of Quebec. Did anyone within the party, once you decided, I'm guessing you talked to people within the party, try to convince you to stay?
Yes, of course. And but I made my decision and they know me well. Once I reached a decision, it's because I went through everything in my mind and I tried different options. And I came down that no, this is it, and some people were like, well, we can drive you back and forth. I'm like, I already have my colleague Monsef de Hagy, because at some point I couldn't drive when I was pregnant, so Monsef was coming out of his way to pick me up to drive me to Quebec and to bring me back home safely. So that's not the issue. My issue is that 3 to 4 times a week I'm away from my kids.
We can wait 15 years.
Are we going to see you back in politics one day? Do you ever think of...
I cannot think for the next 15 years.
You'll still be young and younger
I'm
Legault.
40. Next year, yes, I'm younger than him. But next
in 15
year,
years you will
40.
be too.
I'm a tax lawyer. I used to be the director of the tax program at the University of Sherbrooke on the campus Longueuil. And I was very vocal to tackle all the issues with tax haven. So I'll be back to what I know the best, tax law.
Marwah Rizqy, Greg Kelley, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us.
Yeah.
Enjoy your little guys.
Absolutely.
That wraps up another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here at the Stone Deli. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.